Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spring Authors and Arcs webinar, where we'll be pairing author presentations in a panel with free e-arcs of the books discussed today. I'm Susan McGuire, Senior Editor, Collection Management and Library Outreach here at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is the toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Links to today's slides and a title list, which includes links to the e-arcs of all the amazing titles discussed today, were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom about an hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the slides at any time by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. Today, we have the pleasure hearing from a full panel of folks. Lily Anderson, whose title The Throwback List publishes October 5th. Krystal Axelrod, whose book The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes publishes May 4th. Amy Lynn Green, whose book The Lines Between Us publishes August 31st. Irene Hannon, whose book Blackberry Beach publishes April 6th. Julie Murphy, whose book If the Shoe Fits publishes August 3rd. Suzanne Simonetti, whose book The Sound of Wings publishes May 4th, and Suzanne Woods Fisher, whose book At Lighthouse Point also publishes on May 4th. First up, we're going to hear from Lily Anderson. Lily is a school librarian and a Melville Dewey fangirl with an ever-growing collection of musical theater tattoos and Harry Potter ephemera. She is the author of The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You, Not Now, Not Ever, and Undead Girl Gang. She lives in Northern California, far from her mortal enemy, the snow. Visit her online at mslilyanderson.com. Welcome, Lily. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much. After 6 years of exclusively writing young adult, I'm so excited to share my first book where the characters have jobs and pay taxes. This is The Throwback List. The Throwback List is about 3 women in their mid-20s who find themselves back in their coastal Oregon hometown after almost a decade away. Bianca comes home to be the caretaker for her grandmother and manage the family tattoo parlor. Autumn failed to get famous in Los Angeles and now runs her old high school theater department. And Joe, who spent all of high school planning how to get away, now has nowhere else to go when she's unceremoniously fired from her fancy Silicon Valley job. And on her first night back in her childhood bedroom, she finds a bucket list that she and Autumn planned but never executed, which leads us to this bit of chapter 1 that I would like to share with you. For anyone who is sharing the room, their space with a child or has delicate sensibilities, there's some mild salty language, just be aware. At the end of the long galley kitchen, past the shelving covered in decades of forgotten juicers and George Foreman grills, was a window. It faced the front yard of the house next door, Bianca Boria's house. Bianca Boria had been Joe's pace car in high school. If Joe did well, Bianca did better. If Joe worked hard, Bianca worked harder. While Joe did everything with sweat in her eyes and the wind in her hair, Bianca glided past her with an easy smile. When people talked shit about her single mom and tattooed grandparents, she didn't even flinch. She wore a bikini on social media and captioned it, "Fat doesn't mean ugly," single-handedly bringing body positivity to point high. She was the president of the Honor Society and prom queen, a feat that rocked the core of their teens' social hierarchy. It's like living next door to a unicorn, Joe thought, or a princess. Or a princess unicorn? Nope, that's the wine talking. Like any self-respecting marketing professional, Jo wasn't unfamiliar with the art of internet stalking. She knew that Bianca still lived next door, although her mother had moved out, and she was married to a guy whose name Jo didn't recognize from the yearbook. Jo had tried scrolling through their wedding album. Bianca had worn the poofiest Cinderella dress imaginable, but had been too weirded out when she saw Autumn Kelly as the maid of honor. Autumn and Bianca must have become friends in college. Basically, anyone going to college after Point High went to Oregon State. Seeing Autumn weepily help Bianca into a wedding dress had flared an uncomfortably territorial feeling in the back of Jo's mind. She hadn't been able to enjoy peering into Bianca's account since. But now, TP Bianca's house was staring up at her from the top of the list. She took another pinch of cake, popped it in her mouth, mashed it into the roof of her mouth, tried again, chewed it like a sober girl. She went searching for toilet paper. There was a roll hidden behind 8 cans of baked beans from the hall closet emergency kit, and then 3 rolls from the bathroom that she and Eden now shared upstairs. Jo grabbed her phone and ran out the front door. Freezing in the pitch dark, she loped across the sandy driveway toward the yellow glow of Bianca Borea's porch light. Unlike the Freeman's house, with its dehydrated wood shingles responsible for a million childhood splinters, Bianca's house was bright white with a pastel blue door and a yard full of matching hydrangea plants. Right in front, nearest to Jo's house, there was the biggest tree in the neighborhood, an Oregon maple. Supplies set down in the grass, Jo threw a roll of toilet paper at the tree. It bounced off a branch and fell to the ground, dribbling back towards her across the perfectly trimmed grass. "Oh, fuck," she said out loud, genuinely surprised. She hadn't come out here to fail at TPing. It wasn't a par game. It was a skills test. She squared her shoulders, picked up the failed throw. She quickly unwrapped as much of the paper as she could while having a decent handful left on the roll to hold on to. She tossed it again. The little tail flapped between branches while the rest fell to the ground. Success was a rush even better than a tipsy mouthful of German chocolate cake. She launched more toilet paper rolls, delighting in the way they floated in the darkness like ghosts. She didn't feel the cold. Bianca's lawn rinsed the sand from her feet. If she'd still been wearing a QCO tracker rather than leaving all of them in a toilet at HQ after cleaning out her desk, it would have shown her pulse up in the heart eyes emoji range. Behind the warm glow of exertion and wine, she imagined TPing becoming the next fitness craze. All black athleisure, ski masks, the pseudo nemesis of your choosing's house, a coach in your earpiece screaming something motivational. Until losing her gym class app, Jo never realized how much she would miss the aggressive affirmations. How do people get out of bed in the morning without being called a sweat goddess? With the tree fully covered, Jo reached for her phone and took a picture of her work. The shot would have been even better with her camera and tripod, but they were in boxes in the garage. The picture was just a souvenir, proof to her younger self that she was capable of hitting a goal, even a stupid one. Through her phone lens, she saw that a single roll of toilet paper had fallen to the ground between 2 tree roots. Determined to leave no roll behind, she scooped it up. Looking for the perfect place to launch it, she ran around the tree, smiling as beatifically as Bianca Borea, crushing her GPA, running the student council, getting married at 25 with the only best friend Jo had ever had by her side. Joanna? Bianca Borea stood directly beneath the porch light. For a moment, Jo was positive that Bianca was wearing a long-sleeved evening gown, red carpet ready in the middle of the night. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized it was a plush bathrobe. Bianca's dark hair was pulled up in a high, elegant bun that had never known frizz. Her skin was clear. Jo looked at the last roll weighing down her right hand. She threw it. It bonked Bianca on the nose. Jo ran home and didn't look back. That's the end of chapter 1. Thank you all so much.
That was amazing. Year ago me is slightly triggered by the wasted toilet paper, but It was still very fun. Thank you so much, Lily. Next, we'll hear from Zio Axelrod. Zio is a USA Today best-selling author. She writes different flavors of contemporary romance and what she likes to call strange, twisted tales. Zio grew up in the recording industry and began performing at a very young age. As a result, her knowledge of popular music is nearly encyclopedic. A completely unapologetic, badge-wearing, fic-writing fangirl, Zio finds inspiration in everything around her. When she isn't working on the next story, Zio can be found behind the microphone in a studio, writing songs in her bedroom-turned-recording booth, or performing on international stages under a different, not-so-secret name. Ooh. She lives in complete denial of the last 5 minutes of Buffy, with one very patient, full-time indoor husband and several part-time, supremely pampered outdoor cats. Take it away, Zio.
Everyone gets that. Ooh, thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thank you to Booklist for having me here today to talk about my beloved book baby, The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes, which will be out on Sourcebooks Casablanca on May the 4th. I always feel like I should insert a Star Wars joke there, but I'll just stick to talking about the book. Singer and guitarist Tony Bennett, believe her, she's heard all the jokes before, has been making a name for herself in Philadelphia's indie music scene, with an eye toward owning her own studio someday. When a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make that dream come true drops into her lap, Tony is eager to jump at the chance. There's only one problem. She needs to get her hands on a ton of cash. The Lilies are the hottest new band on the national scene. And as luck would have it, they need a new guitarist. Tony's friends encourage her to audition, but her interest in becoming a rock star is less than zero. Still, she can't turn down the money. So Tony goes for it. But little does she know that the person with the power to make or break this huge moment in her life is the same boy who broke in her heart and left her in their dead-end town with no way out. Sebastian Quick never forgot his first true friend, nor the pain he caused when he ran away in the middle of the night and left her behind. The last thing he expects is for Tony to audition for the Lilies, never mind blow them all away with her incredible skill. Seeing her again unearths long-buried feelings in Seb, including guilt, shame, and another deeper emotion he's never allowed himself to admit aloud, something that feels a lot like love. So I'm going to read you a little bit of Tony's experience as a musician in the indie music scene. This is from chapter 1. A musty combination of caked-on blackout paint and well whiskey filled Tony's nostrils. The Electric Unicorn was little more than a double-wide row home in the Fishtown section of Philadelphia. The first floor had been transformed into a dive bar sometime during the 1960s. It wasn't much different than the rundown places Tony had grown up around. Cheap drinks, faceless musicians, and loyal locals haunted the poorly lit tables and booths. Somehow, the Unicorn had survived the rash of gentrification that had transformed the neighborhood from a pockmarked blue-collar holdout into a thriving hipster wonderland, complete with organic beer gardens and vegan pizzerias. Hey, Tony. She raised her head in time to see Axel Page step into the room. He was a regular on open mic night, and Axel twirled the e-cigarette in his left hand and hoisted his backpack on his shoulder with the other. Not playing tonight? Axel shook his head. Nah, I can't. Got an audition for this theater gig in Old City. Theater? Tony lifted an eyebrow. Yeah, some sort of one-man show. Sounds cool. Axel nodded. I thought so. Listen, he began running along fingers through his shock of brown hair. That asshole from last week is back. Tony cursed under her breath. I thought he'd been banned. Axel grunted, his expressive blue eyes flashing. You know Elton has a 3-strike rule. Unless they get physical, she quoted. Unless they get physical, Axel echoed. Ignore him, okay? Tony nodded, already backing off from her decision to try out some new arrangements. Have a good night. You too, she offered him a thin smile, her brain working overtime. Hecklers came with the territory, but Tony loved the Unicorn because they didn't frequent the place. They weren't encouraged here, as they were at other venues. The Electric Unicorn was a safe space. Well, usually. With a diverse cast and a killer soundtrack, The Girl with Stars in Her Eyes is a book for anyone who's ever had a dream deferred. It's a modern-day rock star fairy tale about second chances, found family, and the power of music to change lives. Readers will get an immersive experience listening to the band on apps like Spotify and following their career on various social media accounts. As someone who grew up in the music industry, I wanted to give readers a little glimpse behind the curtain. And my hope is that everyone will fall in love with the girl with stars in her eyes. Thanks again for having me.
Yay. You will fall in love. I can feel it. Thank you so much, Thea. We'll now hear from Amy Lynn Green. Amy Lynn is a lifelong lover of books, history, and library cards. She worked in publishing for 6 years before writing her first historical fiction novel based on the World War II home front of Minnesota, the state where she lives, works, and survives long winters. Because of her day job in publicity, she has taught classes on marketing at writers' conferences and regularly encourages established and aspiring authors in their publication journeys. In her novels and her daily life, she loves exploring the intersection of faith and fiction and searches for answers to present-day questions by looking to the past. Thank you for joining us today, Amy Lynn.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. All right, so I am a debut author whose first book released in November 2020, Things We Didn't Say. And I'm going to share a little bit about what inspired that book and my next book, The Lines Between Us, that's coming out this September. I love history. I love World War II homefront history, which is where both of these two books are set. Some reasons for that are because I love reading 1940s set fiction, but a lot of those are set on the European theater. So exploring America's involvement in World War II has led me to some unusual historical facts that I didn't know and that I know readers didn't realize either, which has been a great journey. It also allows me to have a little bit of a lighter tone in my fiction. Obviously, books that are dealing with the Holocaust or resistance to Nazi occupation are going to be a little heavier on the historical side of things, and that's appropriate, but I really enjoy witty banter and fun subplots, which I'm able to work into my writing. You can go to the next slide. So Things We Didn't Say is an epistolary novel, which means that it's a collection of letters and other documents. And you can see on the next slide some of the epistolary novels that I've read and enjoyed. There are so many of them, so many fun ones. And I always knew someday I would love to write a story in this format. I had several other manuscripts in the drawer that didn't go anywhere. But then I found out a particular aspect of Minnesota's history that I thought this would be perfect for an epistolary novel. You can find that on the next slide. I found out that during World War II, there were over a dozen prisoner of war camps in Minnesota. These were German soldiers who were working on factories and farms and in logging camps for the duration of the war. The people who lived in those towns obviously had strong feelings about the prisoners of war being there. And that's the kind of conflict that as an author, I say, there's got to be a story there. So in exploring that history, I came up with the story of Johanna Berglund, who is forced to go back to her small hometown to serve as a translator in one of the prisoner of war camps, and the conflict that she finds between the humanity of the prisoners there and the fact that we are in the middle of a war with these people. It was fascinating to explore that and another aspect of Minnesota history on the next slide. It turns out that only a few miles away from my house, there used to be the Military Intelligence Services Language School, which trained mostly Japanese Americans in the military applications of language so that they could become translators, spies, and hostage negotiators on the Pacific Front. So learning how on earth these Japanese Americans, most of whom were from Hawaii or California, ended up in Minnesota of all places during the war was fascinating. And through the character of Peter Ito, who was Joe's best friend, I got to incorporate a lot of the true stories of these men who served their country so faithfully in a time when their country was not serving them. All right, next slide. As a debut novelist, obviously it's completely terrifying to hear what people are going to think of your book, so I was honored that Booklist gave it a starred review and praised Johanna for her gumption, humility, and wit, which are 3 things that I would love for people to say about me as well, so I was delighted that they said that about Joe. Next slide. Library Journal also called it a moving exploration of prejudice and friendship across ethnic and gender lines, which I love because that's the thing that I wanted to do most in the story, is to explore those themes. So I love that they saw that in the story. Next slide. And that's an approximation of my face when they compared me to Susan and Lisa, because those are 2 historical fiction authors who I have long admired and have a great respect for their work. So Really thankful for all of the readers and other authors who have been so encouraging in this journey. All right, next slide. Coming up next is The Lines Between Us in September 2021. For this one, it's also set during World War II in the American home front, but isn't an epistolary novel. So this one isn't told in letters because it's more of a mystery storyline. Next slide. The fun history that I found for this one is I did not realize that during World War II, conscientious objectors who felt because of their deep convictions that they couldn't serve in the military were assigned to a number of other interesting tasks, including parachuting into wildfires in the Pacific Northwest in place of men who had enlisted in the Army. So the story, The Lines Between Us, follows a group of those men who were involved in a tragic accident that one of them doesn't think is an accident at all, and the investigation into what really happened in that incident. I was also able to include the Triple Nickels, who are the first all-Black paratrooper unit that comes in the ending of the story and is part of the reveal of what is actually going on with some mysterious wildfires. Their dedication to their country and their service was inspiring to me. I got to read a lot of interviews with them, and they are some of my favorite characters, including real life historical people in my novels is one of my favorite things to do as a tribute to all that they did for us. All right, next slide. I'd love to stay in touch with all of you. I've had a great joy of being able to speak and do Zoom events with a number of libraries and book clubs across the country this year. That's been one of my favorite things about this crazy year that we've had. So if that sounds interesting to you, my email address is amy@amygreenbooks.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook if you'd like to connect that way. I love sharing lots of bookish fun, getting book recommendations from others. It's been a journey. So thank you to all of you. Thank you for the way that you serve readers. Thank you for connecting readers with books, especially during this difficult year. All right, turn it back over to you, Susan.
Okay, that sounds amazingly fascinating. So thank you so much, Amy Lynn. Next up, we've got Irene Hannon. Irene is the best-selling author of more than 60 contemporary romance and romantic suspense novels. In addition to her many other awards and honors, she is a 3-time winner of the Rita Award, the Oscar of romance fiction, from the Romance Writers of America, and is a member of that organization's elite Hall of Fame. When not writing, Irene loves to perform in community musical theater productions and has sung the leading role in numerous shows. Pre-COVID, she and her husband also enjoyed traveling, long hikes, Saturday mornings at their favorite coffee shop, and spending time with family. She hopes to get back to all of those pursuits soon, you and me both. Take it away, Irene.
Thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. Well, I'm always excited to talk about my next release, but I have to tell you, I'm especially happy to be talking to all of you because for 7 years during my high school and college days, I worked at our local library. And ever since then, libraries and librarians have had a special place in my heart. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Blackberry Beach, which is book 7 in my long-running Hope Harbor series. But I do want to point out that like all the books in this series, it can be read as a standalone. The main characters are new in each story, and there are no hanging plot threads from book to book. Now, before I tell you about this particular novel, I thought you might like to hear how Hope Harbor came to be. Back in 2013, I had an idea for a trade-length contemporary romance set on the Oregon coast. At the time, though, I was writing romantic suspense for my current publisher, meaning that this would require them to take a leap of faith with me into a different genre. Fortunately, my editor was game. So off I went to Oregon, where I traveled the coast from top to bottom, taking notes and photos as this town that had only been a concept in my mind began to take shape. Much of what I learned on that research trip became part of the fabric of Hope Harbor, like seagull romance, which led me to Floyd and Gladys, my seagull couple who are in every book and have earned a place on every cover. The tide pools I visited ended up being the centerpiece of my last Hope Harbor book. And the amazing cinnamon rolls I had at a tiny pastry shop became the signature item at Hope Harbor's Sweet Dreams Bakery. Once I was back at my desk, I wrote the first book, which was called Hope Harbor. And then I crossed my fingers and held my breath. Well, the response was beyond anything I could have hoped for. The book not only became a bestseller, but the critical reviews confirmed that I had succeeded in creating a warm, welcoming town readers would want to return to again and again. More books followed, and an 8th book is scheduled for April of next year. The series has also received its share of awards and honors, and every book has been a bestseller. The critical reviews also continue to be very positive. You may recognize one of the respected review sites I've cited on this slide. In addition to its popularity in the US, the series has also attracted an international audience with translation rights sold in Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, and South Africa. So with that background, let me now talk about Blackberry Beach. Book 7 in the series features Catherine Parker, who's come to Hope Harbor incognito. For years, she's poured blood, sweat, and tears into achieving her dream. But now, on the cusp of that dream, she's suddenly not sure it's what she really wants. So she rents a house high above Blackberry Beach to rethink her future. Well, her next door neighbor is Zach Garrett, who owns the local coffee shop. He's already made a dramatic change in his life, and he has no intention of getting involved with a mysterious woman who's only a visitor. But as these two start to interact, Hope Harbor begins to work its special magic in their lives and to help them both find the path they were meant to follow. In addition to the main romance in my Hope Harbor books, I always interweave a secondary plot that touches readers' hearts in a different way. In one book, I featured a Syrian refugee family adapting to life in a new country. In another, an older reclusive woman who'd been estranged from her son for many years, but still yearned to reconnect. In Blackberry Beach, the secondary plot involves Zach's single aunt, an international business executive who's just taken an early retirement package, and one of Zach's baristas, a widower who's a retired postal worker. Their story is about meeting a soulmate later in life when both people have their futures well mapped out. But sometimes plans are meant to be changed. One of the things I think readers will connect with in this book is the theme of crossroads. All of us at one time or another have had to make a choice we know will change our life forever. In Blackberry Beach, I tried to show how that decision can be easier if we're willing to open our hearts to the goodness and generosity around us, to learn from each other. You know, in this COVID era, when so many people are isolated and yearning for human interaction, I think a book that celebrates the power of connectivity and community and the magic that can happen when lives intertwine will resonate with readers. And finally, here's a fun bonus. For the first time, we've literally put Hope Harbor on the map. Blackberry Beach contains 2 maps, one of downtown and another of the broader area. It was an amazing thrill to see my fictional town come to life like this. If you've never been to Hope Harbor, I hope you'll visit and invite your patrons to come along. I guarantee you'll leave refreshed, uplifted, and encouraged. Thank you so much for your time today, and please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much, Irene. We will now hear from Julie Murphy. Julie is the New York Times bestselling author of Dumplin', now a Netflix original movie starring Jennifer Aniston. She lives in North Texas with her husband, dog, and cats, and the floor is yours, Julie.
Hey, y'all. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm excited to be here to talk about If the Shoe Fits, which is my very first adult novel. Like my bio says, sorry, I just want to make sure everyone can see me. I don't know if it's shifted to me yet, but anyways, I'm Julie Murphy, like I said, and like my bio said, I am a former young adult, well, not former, current young adult novelist and middle grade novelist. A lot of you might know me best for Dumplin', which is a Netflix film with a great soundtrack by Dolly Parton, which I will never fully be over that fact. But yeah, so If the Shoe Fits is my very first adult novel. It's part of a new line from Disney, where each book is a reimagining of one of their iconic princess stories as a modern day rom-com. And I don't know about you, but that's basically a word salad of everything I love in life. So just the opportunity to get to be behind the scenes on this was really incredible. when I was approached with this project, I knew immediately that I wanted to tackle Cinderella. Of all the Disney princesses, she's always been like the most iconic to me. For me, like she's like the original Disney princess in a lot of ways. She was always the one I obsessed over. Like every little detail of her I loved, from like the earrings to the choker to the slippers. Like I just love Cinderella. So she was definitely the one I wanted to tackle. And then the other thing that I came to Disney with was that I said I would really like for her to be plus size. I'd really like for her to be fat. I want for this reimagining of a Disney princess to reflect my own life experience and what it feels like to be a plus size woman living in a modern fairy tale. So If the Shoe Fits stars Cindy. She is a recent fashion school graduate. She has graduated from Parsons in New York City with a serious dedication to footwear. As a plus size woman, there's something really magical to her about how straightforward shoe sizing and shopping is. And I know that I can definitely relate to that. I remember growing up, I was just constantly like circling the accessories as a kid, or like as a teen when I was with all my friends, just looking for something that I could shop for in all their stores, where like the biggest size went up to like a size 10 sometimes. So Cindy really recognizes that and has like this sort of like almost sense of camaraderie with like her shoe collection. It's really part of her. So with no job prospects in sight, she unfortunately has to head home to LA to live with her stepmother, who it just so happens to be the producer of one of like these iconic dating competition reality TV shows that's very much inspired by The Bachelor, and it's called Before Midnight. So after this casting fiasco happens and Cindy is back in LA, her stepmother is in a tight spot and Cindy's given the opportunity to go onto the show as a contestant. She can't help but say yes to the exposure and the idea of like being this like up and coming designer featured on this reality TV show. And of course, there's like the opportunity of a cash prize if she actually were to win this thing. What she really doesn't expect is to fall for this Prince Charming and suddenly become an overnight sensation and this body positive icon as the show's first ever plus size contestant. One thing I'm especially proud of is how well this book works as a crossover title or even a stepping stone for young adult readers who are interested in shifting to adult romance. It's definitely the kind of romance that gets your heart fluttering, but it's also something that you could book club with your mom. And I feel like that's walking a very tight line. But the storytelling opportunity with this book has been one of the most exciting moments in my career. The average American woman is now between a size 16 to 18. And sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you dream. It's sometimes the only way to see yourself is to actually see yourself. So the only way that you can like realize your dreams is by seeing your dreams play out. And sometimes we have to see that in our fiction. So I know that as a young plus size reader, I would have had a lot more faith in a lot of my dreams if I'd read a story like Cindy's about a woman pursuing her passion and even falling in love, all while existing in a body that looks like mine. For so long, I didn't think love or happily ever after was in the cards for me. I just thought that that was never going to be part of my story. But the truth is, we all deserve that modern fairy tale. I think I have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to read a little excerpt from If the Shoe Fits. If you've ever seen The Bachelor, this is like the moment when the girls are all lining up on the first night to kind of meet the Bachelor for the very first time. And If the Shoe Fits, we call him the suitor. So this is that moment as Cindy is preparing to do that. We saved the best for last, Beck says as she slams the door. I scoff at that. Yeah, right. More like this guy is going to be a total zombie from meeting 25 women back to back. Wes tilts his head to listening in on his headset. Move it, he shouts as he runs past some craft services balancing a tray of sandwiches. We've got a breakdown happening by the pool. He holds the walkie-talkie up to his mouth. No, let her spiral. I need those tears. I don't know if it's his gross reaction to some woman in crisis or if it's just my nerves, but I feel sick to my stomach. Whoa there, Beck says, steadying me. Ignore him. I shake my head. I don't think I can do this. I need to go home. There's still time. Erica would only be a little bit disappointed if I left now. I haven't even really been on camera. And I can apologize to the whole crew that came out to the house and stop. Her voice is stern. You can do this, Cindy. You look incredible. You're smart, funny, and talented. The suitor is going to love you. The audience is going to love you. And most importantly, they're going to die over those shoes. I look down at the feathers framing my ankles, my shoes, my beautiful shoes. Even if all I do is walk out there and introduce myself, millions of people will at least know my name and see my shoes. Even if I never design another shoe again, I'll always have that moment. I take a deep breath. I can do anything in these shoes. Wait, Ash yells, sprinting up the hill from the trailers down below. Wait. When she reaches us, her chest is heaving, but she's holding a highlighter and brush in her hands. Sorry, Wes had us all over, so busy tonight, but I wanted to get up here to check on you. Me? I ask. Ash smiles with a laugh. Yes, you, Cindy, she winks. We all have our favorites, you know. And that little piece of information steadies me even more. Thank you, I whisper. She dusts my cheekbones and the tip of my nose with rose gold highlighter. Perfect. The Rolls Royce is straight out of a fairy tale, a glistening white against the swirling sunset sky, and welded to the grille is the sparkling before midnight logo, a ticking Roman numeral clock. This is really happening. The car drives me the short distance up the rest of the hill and through the gate of the chateau, as though this were my very first time arriving here. The car stops and the driver in the front calls, "That's your cue," through the crack in the divider. I open the door and step out, imagining the camera zooming in for a close-up of my shoes. Hey, a girl can dream. As I stand, I take a deep breath and a quick moment to smooth out my dress. And for just a millisecond, I think, what if this random guy really is the love of my life? What if fate is actually real and the two of us are meant for this moment? I look up and am briefly shocked by all the lights and camera crew quietly stepping around us. My vision focuses and my gasp cuts through the humid night air. Tall, dark hair, impeccable suit, Prince Charming himself. That's it. Thank you all so much. I have had such a great time. I miss seeing you all in person.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try not to spend the entire Q&A talking to you about The Bachelor. So let's be strong. Next up is Suzanne Simonetti. Suzanne grew up in the New York suburbs just outside of the city. After earning a BS in marketing, she spent several years writing press releases until she left her corporate job to focus on her passion for crafting fiction. She lives on Cape May Harbor with her husband. When not on her paddleboard or yoga mat, she can be found at the beach, trailing the shoreline for seashells, scribbling in her notebook, and channeling dolphins for meaningful conversations. Find her online at SuzanneSimonetti.com, on Facebook at Suzanne Simonetti Author, on Instagram at Suzanne Simonetti Author, or on Twitter at ExitZeroSusie. Thank you for joining us today, Suzanne.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here, and I'm with quite a lineup. I'm enjoying every one of these presentations. My name is Suzanne Simonetti, and my debut novel is titled The Sound of Wings. The three main characters in the story are women, and they're different ages, all dealing with different life challenges. Next slide, please. The book is character-driven. Deep consideration was given in the crafting of these women, and there's an element of mystery throughout the story. The monarch is a key symbol and it represents the passage we take in the physical realm to the metaphysical in many different cultures. Next slide, please. The book is set in Cape May, New Jersey. It sits at the southernmost tip of the state, separating the Delaware Bay from the Atlantic Ocean. The town is wrought with history, founded in the 17th century by Dutch settler Captain May. In 1976, it was preserved as a National Historic Landmark. It is home to the United States Coast Guard training base, as well as the famous Bird Observatory, one of the top bird sites in North America. There's a flurry of activities for visitors here in Cape May, from dolphin and whale watching to the Cape May Zoo and Lighthouse. You can even take a candlelit ghost tour of the old Victorians. I could spend 1 hour on Cape May alone, but I surely won't. I do want to say the town itself is so charming and quaint, it served as another character in the book. Next slide, please. I approach my character development as an exploration of human nature and self, the ways in which we connect to others as we move through life, uncovering hidden talents and passions maybe we didn't know were there. I'm also a firm believer that in order to progress and elevate ourselves to the next level, we need to let go of whatever it is that may be holding us back. All three of our characters will face every one of these topics within the book. Next slide, please. We open the story in the butterfly garden. Goldie Sparrows is our local potter, and she owns a store in the town. She's getting on in years and facing issues from her finances to health concerns. During her moments of weakness within the book, when Goldie finds herself questioning and self-doubting herself, she feels the presence of her long gone dead husband. He wasn't particularly nice to her, and we're going to learn more about their history as the book moves on. Next slide, please. Jocelyn Anderson is our struggling writer. She's spending the summer completing her manuscript, and her ex is threatening to change the arrangement of their custody agreement. Jocelyn discovers a mysterious journal which distracts her from her work. She's pulled through the pages of time, finding a bridge to the other two women. Next slide, please. Krystal Axelrod is our born and bred local. She comes from an impoverished background. She's a strikingly beautiful young woman, and yet she carries the voices of a punishing mother and mean girl culture from her youth. She suddenly is living a life she never dreamed she could have, married to a wonderfully supportive and very rich husband. Yet despite her lavish surroundings, Krystal feels empty inside. We're going to take a journey with Krystal as she discovers self-worth and her own empowerment. Next slide, please. These three women find their way to one another, forming an unlikely bond as they learn more about the world and themselves. We'll also take close examinations of the twists and sharp turns of parenthood and marriage. Next slide, please. Everyone listening here today knows the beauty of getting lost in a great book. When I'm at my writing table, the room I'm sitting in fades as I get immersed into the story. If I can provide the same sense of escape for my readers, I know I have done my job. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Our final presenter today, before we move on to the panel portion, will be another Suzanne Woods Fisher. Suzanne is an award-winning, best-selling author of more than 30 books, including On a Summer Tide and On a Coastal Breeze, as well as The Nantucket Legacy, Amish Beginnings, The Bishop's Family, The Deacon's Family, and the In at Eagle Hill series, among other novels. She is also the author of several nonfiction books about the Amish, including Amish Peace and Amish Proverbs. She lives in California. Learn more at SuzanneWoodsFisher.com and follow Suzanne on Facebook at Suzanne Woods Fisher Author and on Twitter at Suzanne W. Fisher. Take it away, Suzanne.
Thank you. My name is Suzanne. It's fun to have another Suzanne on the lineup. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am a huge fan of libraries, and I appreciate so much all that you do for your community. I've gone on some book tours where I've headed into some really impoverished parts of the United States, and public libraries serve the community in more ways than I can count. It's just something we take for granted in urban areas. And speaking of urban, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've written over 30 books for Revell. Most of my books have been about the old order Amish. My grandfather was raised plain. But I've also written historical fiction and contemporary women's fiction. And that brings me to next at Lighthouse Point, book 3 in the Three Sister Islands series. So there's only a few more days now until winter finally ends, but seasons never seem to pay any attention to the calendar. So just for a moment, I want you to just imagine a perfect summer day. Next. The Three Sisters Island series is actually about a family. It's a dad about my age who realizes that his three young adult daughters are growing estranged from each other. And something has to change, this dad reasons. So he buys the majority hold of a little bankrupt island off the coast of Maine. His daughters rush to the island, convinced that dear old dad is losing his mind. In each of the books, a sister takes a turn as the main character. Next. So at Lighthouse Point, the youngest sister, Blaine Grayson, finally gets her turn. And Blaine has had a bumpy road to adulthood, but at long last, she is ready to step up and take her place in the family business. After being away for 2 years, she's returning home armed with a very fancy culinary degree from Le Cordon Bleu in France and commercial restaurant experience. And she has big plans to take the family camp to the next level by creating a fine dining service. Next. Well, to Blaine's shock, when she arrives back home, the camp's kitchen remodel has already been done by her sisters and done badly. It's the kind of kitchen remodel that was designed by someone who has absolutely no idea how to cook. And for once, Blaine is not overreacting. When the Food and Safety State Inspector of Maine arrives, he too is horrified with the remodel, and he fines the camp for numerous safety violations. And suddenly, Blaine's dream of taking this family camp to a new level is not only blown apart, but the future of the camp's at risk. Next. Nothing is going as Blaine expected, nothing at all, including a brush off from Artie Latosky. Blaine and Artie had met in college and became the best of friends, and he's now a doctor on a medical lightship to the outlying islands. There's about 3,000 little islands off the coast of Maine. Not all of them are inhabited year-round, but many of them are. And he is warm and friendly and loved by the local residents. Very cold and distant to Blaine. She can't figure that out. Next. Part of my research for this series was to study the effects of birth order on siblings, and Blaine is just a classic youngest child. She feels very crowded out by her overachieving eldest sister and her overly sensitive middle sister, and her dreams, she thinks, are just gone. And she starts believing that the old maxim is true, that you just can't go home again. Next. But then something unexpected happens. And Blaine has kind of an aha moment, a breakthrough, and she starts to imagine a new dream, a daring one that really takes her family by surprise. And as the project gets underway, it even takes Blaine by surprise, because the best moments in life are always the ones we don't see coming. Next. So just a side note, I took all of these pictures myself while in Maine doing research. And the reason I tell you that is because the coast of Maine in the summertime really is that beautiful. These are an amateur photographer and they are stunning. Such a beautiful place for an island to be, and such a great place to read a book and feel like you've gone on vacation. Next. And this last slide are the 3 books in the series, On a Summer Tide, On a Coastal Breeze, and then At Lighthouse Point is just about to release. They're the gorgeous covers. They make you just want to kind of slip right into the scene and get carried away. So thank you for letting me share my series with you today. And I'm going to pass it back.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. So now that we've had a chance to hear more about your books and your stories, we're going to transition into panel mode. So let's all use our technical know-how and unmute yourselves and start your videos. I'm going to do it too. Hi, everyone, faces. So what we're going to do is I'll ask each of you one question at a time, and then depending on how much time we have left after that, we'll do another round of questions before wrapping up, but here we go. I'm going to start with Suzanne Woods Fisher, Suzanne number 2, and then work my way back in reverse order. So, Suzanne, there you are. I'm having trouble finding you all on the screen, but that's not a problem for the people listening to the webinar, so let's just ask questions. Okay. So Suzanne, in the Three Sisters Island series, you examine several familial issues. Which particular issue ties all three books in the series together, would you say?
I think birth order and its effects on are sort of a theme on this whole series. It's just amazing to think of how those 18 years of our childhood shape the rest of your life. And I find it kind of fascinating. In fact, I think Kevin Leman is a Revell author and has written quite a few books that I'd recommend if you're interested. But the main character, Blaine, is sort of a work in progress and in all three books. And she's really gaining an awareness of how birth order has shaped her and sort of held her back. And she's finally, little by little, learning how to overcome the things that keep derailing her so that she really finally reaches her potential.
I love that because, I mean, sisters, the relationship between sisters is such a strong theme in women's fiction. And so maybe this is because I am a sibling, but I feel like adding the birth order element to it kind of ups the ante a little bit. So that's really interesting. So let's go to Suzanne Simonetti. So The Sound of Wings, what is the significance of the title and how does it pertain to your story?
Well, you see the monarch is clearly represented on the cover of the book. So surely the wings can be representative of the butterflies, but it doesn't end there. In the story, one of the characters serves as a bit of a silent angel throughout the story to another individual as a protective force. And we learn about that sort of toward the end of the story in the big reveal. So I like the sentiment of The Sound of Wings, which to me represents her silent presence.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Lovely.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on to Julie. So you talked about Dumplin and you've mostly written middle grade and teen books. So what, if anything, did you find different writing for adults? More smooching?
Yeah, a little more smutty. No, I think that and it's a difference in young adult and middle grade for me too, is like, who are the people that you go to when you are in trouble? Who are the people that you refer to when you need answers? And there's, like I said, there's even a slight difference in that with middle grade and young adult. And so with writing this like fresh out of college girl, I really had to like reassess like what her problem solving would look like, and think about like, well, no, when you are broke, you are broke. Like you can't, there's no like, mom, I need $20 for lunch. There's no, so really thinking about that was different. And also just, I think thinking about like her own free will and being able to like truly act with her own desires in mind, it was really exciting and different. I think that when you're writing young adult, and I think Lily could attest to this too, there's this constant like, but what if mom, what if dad, what if family, what if all these things? And there's just something really freeing about getting to place yourself in a different set of shoes. It was really exciting.
Different set of shoes. I get it.
I did. Oh,
see how good she is? She doesn't even know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move to Irene. So Irene, you've written 100 million books. And in addition to contemporary romance, you also write romantic suspense. So why do you write in those two genres? Is one harder than the other? Tell us all about it.
Well, actually, my very first published novels were in the sharp contemporary romance genre. And but as a young child, I was a great fan of Nancy Drew. So I think it was inevitable that at some point I would want to branch into romantic suspense. And so now these days I write one book in each genre every year. So I alternate. And that's a very deliberate choice because my suspense novels tend to be they're very psychological. I do deep character dives. They're very intense. I take readers into the heads of all of the characters or many of the characters, including the villain. So by the time I get done with one, and that's a scary place, let me tell you. So by the time I get done with one of those books, I am so ready to go to my bucolic seaside town in Oregon, where there's plenty of drama, but not of a life and death variety. So it's a really nice balance. It keeps me fresh with each genre. And the question about which is more difficult, probably suspense, for a couple of reasons. You know, suspense, the kind that I write, requires huge amounts of research. By the time I get finished, I usually have about 100 single space typed pages of research notes and citations.
Whoa.
Yeah, in addition to all of the information I've gathered from my cadre of sources that I've developed through the years. Because even though my stories are fiction, the organizations and agencies and protocols I write about are real, and I'm very much a stickler for accuracy. So the research piece can be a bit intimidating. And then the other thing was suspense. You know, suspense plots tend to be pretty involved and complex. You've got a lot of threads going on at one time. You've got to plant clues for readers. You have to put in red herrings. And then by the end of the book, you have to pull all these threads together so that you give your reader a satisfying conclusion. And that takes a lot of brain power. So I think for those reasons, suspense is probably more difficult, but both genres do have their challenges.
Yeah. And my next question for you when we get around to it is, how often do you delete your search history? So get ready for that one. So let's go to Amy Lynn. So both your latest novel, The Lines Between Us, and your first, The Things We Did Say, are historical fiction set in the World War II era. What draws you to this time period? And then thinking about what you're going to work on in the future, are there any other time periods you'd like to explore?
Yeah, I think World War II for me just has so much inherent conflict in it. So clashing ideologies and a lot of drama and tension, even in America during World War II. Like I was saying, like it's not the first home front that you think of as being the most physically dangerous, but there were so many clashes of ideology, just even thinking about the Japanese Americans sent to internment camps because of the prejudice at the time, or other issues that were going on with the government withholding information from its citizens to keep panic down. And the issues and tensions that arise because of that are just like gold. You can throw things at characters and watch them react in a way that maybe you can't in other eras of history. And thinking about things to write in the future, there are so many eras that are interesting to me as a reader. But one thing, I've found some fun historical gems of things that happened directly after World War II. Kind of as a result after the war was over, that I'm just so intrigued. So might do something in the Great era, but I might also sneak over to the 50s and see if we can still count that as historical fiction.
I think it counts. I think it's like 50 years or something. Somebody asked me the other day if a book set in the 70s was historical fiction, and I got sad because I was born in the 70s. So
it
starts getting uncomfortable.
We have 1990s historical fiction.
No,
it's happening.
No,
I can't. I'm ending this call right now. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move on to Zio. So you talked about some amazing music industry experience. So what about your music industry experience prompted you to write The Girl with the Stars in Her Eyes?
Yeah, I grew up in the industry. My dad is a producer, songwriter, arranger, blah, blah, blah. He wrote for a lot of the Philadelphia 70s soul artists. So I grew up listening to like the Stylistics and the OJs and stuff. And for years, I didn't even realize that there was other kinds of music because all I heard was like R&B and soul. And then I discovered rock, and that was it. I kind of fell down that rabbit hole. But I wanted to, well, it took a while for me to bring music to my books. I've written a few independent novels. And then someone was like, dude, you've been doing music your entire life. Like, why haven't you written about that? And I was like, oh, yeah. So this is sort of like a culmination of a few dreams coming together. And I wanted to tell the story of a woman in the music industry, an industry which, you know, sometimes treats women like commodities at best and accessories at worst, you know. So yeah, I wanted to tell that story, and I wanted to show that women can be rock and rollers just like any dude, you know. So yeah. It definitely influenced it.
Awesome. I love it. So Lily, writing a book from 3 different points of view is hard, I imagine. Did you choose that for a particular reason rather than just picking one point of view, or you just want to make things hard for yourself?
I don't know if I wanted to make things hard for myself. I did make things hard for myself. I was like, okay, I'll write my first adult book and my first book in third person. And why not, on top of it, also have 3 different points of view. Really, I started writing the book from one point of view. It was just going to be, here's Jo, here's her bucket list, let's go through it. But in wanting a fuller view of how these characters had grown up. I mean, so much of the book is who you are after college, entering your 30s versus who you were in high school when everyone was like, yeah, this is who you are forever, right? I know you. And so wanting to be able to see everyone kind of reflected back at the other characters, writing 3 points of view was helpful for that, because Jo and Autumn were childhood best friends, but Autumn and Bianca became friends in college and have a completely different point of view on who everyone else is now that they've been back in their town a little bit longer. And so it really just afforded a lot more insight into who everyone is and how the happenings in one chapter that one character feels a particular way about don't necessarily ring the same way in the other 2
Yes.
points of view.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things when you have multiple points of view. And that's what I love about reading a book with like that deep POV is like, there's how the person thinks they are, and then there's how other people see who that person is. And I love it. I mean, it's like, give it to me. That was weird. Sorry. Let's move on. So we made one round. So let's circle back to Suzanne Woods Fisher. Hooray! So at Lighthouse Point, Blaine Grayson is on a journey of self-realization. What discovery does Blaine make that you'd like readers to be left with as they finish the book or the series?
Well, I think each of the sisters kind of comes to terms with themselves and to a point of really true acceptance. And in sort of doing that, each one of them realized they were capable of far more than they imagined, that they didn't have to just live in their strengths. They could also kind of start working on their weaknesses, which I love that idea. You know, I think we all are. We all can kind of have doors closed and new ones open. And I was at the dentist a while ago, and this dentist said to me, he was asking what I did, and I mentioned that I'm an author, and he actually said, "At your age?" And I just thought, oh, you are going to be sorry one day you said that. I would like to revisit you when you're. So anyway, it's funny how I just think there's never an end. Like we put the blocks in front of ourselves, but there's so much still to kind of explore in life and to learn and move on and try new things. And I think that's what the series sort of leaves you with, this sense of possibilities.
Oh, I love that. Don't love your dentist, but I love that sentiment. Suzanne Simonetti. So all of your characters seem to be creative in nature. Can you explain how you went about selecting the vocations for each, and how does that lend itself to the character development?
Sure. Living on Cape May Island, I'm surrounded by creative types. There's no shortage of musicians and artists and performers, painters, and I wanted to sort of bring that to the forefront. Also, as the author, I wanted to make the writing more fun for myself. So I got to research pottery and what it was like to craft jewelry from seashells and sea glass. So I got to learn. So it's almost like I was living vicariously through my characters, because I'm tied to the desk and I'm busy working on the story, and I can be exploring all these other creative avenues. The other thing is a key theme in the book is self-realization, self-discovery. And so I wanted to pair each of the women up with a vocation that would justify them and lift them.
Awesome. I love it. So Julie, are you ready? So Cindy's stepmother and stepsisters are not what we might expect from a Cinderella story. They're not quite evil. They're actually loving and supportive. So what made you choose to write them that way?
It could be because I am a fat girl who grew up only ever identifying with Ursula from The Little Mermaid, but I've always had a really soft spot for villains. Ursula is like, I've dressed as Ursula for like countless Halloweens. She is my icon. She's like my inner goddess. I love Ursula. And so that relates to Cinderella, I promise. So I've always had this really soft spot for villains. And I always have really loved specifically like the stepsisters and how like goofy and derpy and like just like bad they were at being cruel. They were never really good at it to begin with. And I've always loved, the stepmother and how like just beautiful and like fantastic she was in this really severe way. And so it was really easy for me to think about how their stories in a modern day setting might be a lot more sympathetic and how they would actually be layered real people. In the retelling, the two stepsisters are influencers. They're not quite twins, but they're sort of like Irish twins. I don't know if that term is even acceptable anymore. I'm Irish, so you can say Irish twins if you.
I'm an Irish twin, so
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good. Anyhow, they're both like these, up and coming influencers, and her mother is like, or her stepmother is sort of like this cutthroat producer who has like this one sort of like work alter ego where she's just like trying to make it, and like sort of like what Zia was saying, like a very like male dominated world, like a world that was not built for women. So I really leaned into that. And that was one of the things that when I originally started talking about doing this book, that was one of the cornerstones of this book, was that this was not going to be a book about women backbiting or back talking or anything like that with each other. This was going to be a book about complicated women in, a modern world. So yeah, that was really simple. Also, I keep getting distracted because I saw my cat in the backyard and he's not an outdoor cat. And so I think my husband is chasing him down. So if you could see me continually looking, it's
just a small feline emergency.
Yeah. These things happen in the age of Zoom. So
yeah.
Thank you.
So Irene, you mentioned that the main characters are new in every Hope Harbor book, but are there any recurring secondary characters that readers have come to love? Any particular reader faves? Any that they expect to see from book to book?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the keys to creating a setting or a place that is part of a long-running series is the secondary characters. That's one of the things that makes readers really love it, because they have these people that they know will be in lesser roles, but they'll be in every book. So it's like returning to and visiting with old friends. So in the Hope Harbor series, I've already mentioned my seagull couple, Floyd and Gladys, and they always seem to show up when romance is in the air. And then I have, for comic relief, I have the two clerics in town. They're in churches at opposite ends of town, and they're great friends and they're golfing buddies, but they have this ongoing friendly rivalry and this great banter about who serves the best donuts after services and who knows the most about the Bible. And they're just a stitch. Readers love them. They're a hoot. So I always have to have them in there. And then we have Charlie Lopez, who is a renowned artist. He has a taco stand on the wharf. He's been in town for as long as anybody can remember. And he just has this ability to see into people's hearts and to offer these wonderful words of wisdom. And readers have come to just love him. And just to illustrate what I mean by that, of all the characters in all of the 60 plus books I've written combined, he has generated more reader comments. I could not write a book now without Charlie Lopez. So those are some of the characters, and they're there in Hope Harbor, just waiting to greet anybody who comes to visit.
I love it. I mean, that must be so fun to be surprised by what readers connect with.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea when I created Charlie that he would become sort of this iconic figure.
A fan favorite.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So it's been really fun.
I love it. All right, so we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to zoom through. For Amy Lynn, you currently work in publicity. You mentioned you taught classes in marketing at writers' conferences. How do you see your publicity work influencing your writing, and or vice versa? Do you see your writing influencing your publicity work?
Yeah, so many ways. I think one quick and easy thing to explain is that working in publishing and publicity just gives me a really helpful perspective, because working with a lot of our authors, I've seen books that are objectively fantastic that people hated, and books that I thought, I don't really think this is that great, that people loved.
Mhm.
So it gives you a sense of perspective when you're looking at reader reviews to say, reviews are there for the readers, to give feedback, and not every book is going to be for every person. And to lose a little bit of that emotional attachment and kind of say some of the words that I've said to other authors to myself when it comes to things that you can't control. And that's been a very helpful perspective to have, seeing a lot of other authors go through things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good perspective. I love it. So Zio, there's, you talked about your personal connection to music, but why did you think it was important to tell this particular story of Tony?
I think there's a lot of me in Tony, and it's probably the character I've written most of me into. My experience as a singer and a songwriter in the rock part of the music industry was varied. I ran into a lot of obstacles.
Varied.
And I wanted to give her my happy ending that I didn't necessarily get, And I think it's important, like Julie said earlier, to see yourself in a story. I never saw myself on stage doing the things that I wanted to do, and nobody else had either, so they didn't think I could do them. And so I think it's important to write a character like her. She's a badass guitarist. She could rival Prince, she's gorgeous, and she's unapologetically Black. So I wanted to put her there for other people to see.
I love it. And you did. She was awesome.
Thank you.
And then we're going to close it up with Lily. So this is like the perfect question to close with, based on our audience. Do you think that being a librarian has influenced your writing and how you write or what stories you want to tell?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't have started publishing if it weren't for my students. My first book was like very nerdy, very fandom heavy, and I thought it was for no one until I had a bunch of like 5th through 8th graders who were like, "Can I tell you about the new 52 that DC is doing?" And I was like, "Oh, good, you guys get me." And so being a librarian and seeing gaps in a collection, seeing like, oh, someone has this specific request and you go to look for it and you're like, this is close, but it's not quite there. I'm always like begging publishing, like, could we please get chapter books? I need something for 1st through 3rd graders. And so this book in particular being like Julie said about If the Shoe Fits, that crossover, that like it's upper YA, there are so many readers where like when you're in 6th grade, you want to read about high schoolers. When you're in high school, you want to know what college kids are doing. And so this book is very much like, okay, so if you were in your late teens, in your 20s, if you want to look ahead, I wanted to have something there that could fill that gap, as well as something for people who are my age, in your 30s.
Historical fiction.
Exactly. People who lived through history, who want to look back and go, oh, but what if, my friends had the ability to talk to each other and work out problems the way that you can only in fiction. A little bit of wish fulfillment for like, what if when you were 26, you really did figure it out? And so, yeah, I would definitely say being a librarian influenced that. It influences everything. It's such a joy.
I love it. We all need guidance all the time, and books help us there. Yay. So unfortunately, that's all that we have time for today, which is a real bummer because I feel like I could talk to you all for several more hours, but let's give it up once more for Lily, Zio, Amy Lynn, Irene, Julie, and the 2 Suzannes for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you all so much. It's been such a pleasure. Attendees, to start downloading e-arcs of all these fabulous titles, remember to please refer to today's title list. Hyperlinks to each book are included in the column all the way to the right. On Monday, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view an archive of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like these that you see here. And did you know that registration for ALA's virtual annual conference and exhibition is now open? It is. Taking place between June 23rd and 29th, this year's conference will feature amazing speakers, educational programming, and an opportunity to connect with colleagues and librarians everywhere. Plus, if you register before April 16th, you'll save on registration rates. So visit the URL here, https://2021.alaannual.org for more details. And if you're not yet a Booklist subscriber, you can pair the print reading experience with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of the special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. One more thank you to our sponsors, Bethany House, Disney Publishing Group, Revell, Sourcebooks, and She Writes Press. And this concludes today's webinar.